Go ahead and get started. I want to welcome you to this webinar, which is organized by the Early Career Scholars Subcommittee of the North American Arabidopsis Steering Committee. This session is on finding your way into scientific publishing from peer review to editorial roles. My name is Joanna Friesner. I am the coordinator of the North American Arabidopsis Steering Committee. A little brief background, NAASC is a committee of elected faculty and early career scholars that started in 1992. And our goal is to support fundamental plant biology with an emphasis on Arabidopsis. One of our major activities is we organize the annual International Conference on Arabidopsis Research when it's held in North America. And so right now we are working on next year's conference, which will be held at the University of Wisconsin in Madison in the US. So moving to today's webinar, we have 4 panelists with diverse careers involving scientific publishing. But before we meet the panelists, I will briefly introduce the early career scholars who have taken the lead to propose, develop, and organize this event. Julia Zheku is a graduate student at the University of British Columbia in Canada, where she studies primary root physiology and apoplastic root barriers of Arabidopsis and wheat. Previously, she attended the University of Massachusetts Amherst, where she began her research on roots in addition to studying biology and horticulture. Daniela de la Mora is a biologist whose love for flowers led her to study developmental biology. She is currently a graduate student in Dr. Stefan de Folter's laboratory in Cinvestav-Irapuato in Mexico, where she studies the role of cellulase enzymes in the development of the gynecium and fruit in Arabidopsis and tomato. And finally, Fernanda Gomez-Mendez earned her PhD in biochemistry at the National Autonomous University of Mexico, where she studied the root aquaporins of the halophytic plant Mesembryanthemum crystallinum. I'm stuck with Arabidopsis, and the other words are harder, but it's also known as ice plant, which Google told me. After her PhD, she joined Professor Katie DeHesh's laboratory at UC Riverside, where she learned targeted metabolomics and broadened her understanding of plant stress biology. Currently, she investigates the relationship between senescence and Golgi apparatus function in Arabidopsis. So at this time, I would like to ask each of our panelists to very briefly tell the audience who they are and what they do. And I'd like to start with Rory Osborne.
Thank you, Joanna. So my name is Rory. I'm a BBSRC Research Fellow at the University of Birmingham in the UK. It's currently 4 p.m. here to you all who've just woken up. And my research is focused on understanding how plants interact with the microbes in their environment, specifically looking at the role of the epigenome in balancing the relationship between how plants perceive and respond to pathogens and symbionts. Before I was awarded my fellowship, I was a postdoctoral researcher at University of Birmingham, where I was investigating the role of epigenetics in plant development. And then my PhD was from the University of Warwick, so that I was awarded that in 2019. And that project was looking at the role of secreted effector proteins from a root endophyte and how it is able to, how these secreted proteins facilitate symbiosis essentially. And my kind of contributions to scientific editing come from my role as an assistant feature editor for the plant cell. So that was a selective position, which I started that role in 2023, 2024. And after my 2-year tenure within as an AFE for the plant cell, which requires me to write in brief articles highlighting newly published research. I was then, after some conversations with the editor-in-chief, then able to stay on for an additional year to help kind of run the program. So I'm now helping coordinate that program along with Mary Williams, who also runs the AFE program for plant physiology.
Hello, everybody. My name is Andrea Gomez. So I'm from Mexico. So I'm currently doing a postdoc at Indiana University under the supervision of Luc Nicolov. So my research is focused in flower development. We are trying to combine single-cell RNA sequencing together with imaging, confocal imaging, and using approaches like recombination tools to try to understand better flower development. So, yeah, so I'm currently part of the assistant feature editors in the Plant Cell Journal. So I have been there since last year, I think. And also, this is my second postdoc, my current position. Before I was in Canada, doing a postdoc with Daniel Kierkowski. And my entire postdoc was basically doing imaging, confocal imaging of different parts of the Arabidopsis plant. So yeah, that's me.
Hi, so I'm Nancy Hofmann. I got my PhD at UC Davis studying chloroplast protein targeting, just down the hall from where Joanna was working on her PhD at the same time. After that, I ended up working as a science editor for the Plant Cell for several years, and then started a company with two of the other science editors I met there, Jen Mock and Kathy Farquharson, first started as plant editors, and then our umbrella company is Peridot Scientific Communications. Basically, what we do all day is edit, in addition to running the business, is edit papers for individual authors who are preparing manuscripts for publication. We stay within the plant, cellular, and molecular biology space. That's everyone's background, generally. So we would work with authors once they have a draft that they're getting ready for publication. Also, when they're working on revisions, response to reviewers, we can help them make figures, things like that. We also work with several journals doing post-acceptance science editing. So that kind of slots in. Not every journal has this, but tends to be society journals who are sort of investing in the literature. It would slot in between peer review and production. So after there's been peer review and it's been accepted, but before it's been sent off to production to be made into proofs. There's some journals have enough opinions about what needs to be done. For instance, it depends on the journal's priorities, but we might look at certain techniques and make sure that people actually did as many controls as the editorial board wants them to, just things that might have gotten missed during peer review. Sometimes it's about writing. In the last 5 years, it's been a lot of image forensics at that stage, so trying to catch any problems before it goes to publication. Then we also work with quite a few societies on marketing, like we might write emails for marketing, promoting conferences. We run social media feeds for several groups. So basically we stay within any kind of writing that it has a scientific audience. So we don't really do things for the general public, but we do it for a scientific audience. We think of ourselves as kits for PIs. So yes, everyone could write these emails. They also have tons of other things to do, and so they can outsource that to us. Yeah, so I think that's all I need to say at this point, but I'm really looking forward to hearing people's questions and the perspectives from everybody else on the panel.
Well, good morning, everyone. My name's William Teale. I work as a scientific editor at the EMBO Journal. So I started my career as a PhD student in Bristol in England. I then did a postdoc in Cambridge before moving to Freiburg in Germany, where I became a sort of a staff scientist, I guess you'd call it, for a while. I then moved over to the EMBO Journal, and I've been working here for around 5 years.
All right. Well, thank you all for introducing yourself. So we'll start with some prepared panelist questions that the committee developed. And after that, we will then follow with audience questions. So at this time, I'd like to turn over the moderating to Julia.
Thank you, Joanna. I just wanted to say one more time, good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. So I wanted to start by asking the whole panel just a few questions, and maybe I can ask them all, I guess, up front so that we can have a nice discussion about this. But I guess our main question for you all was how and why did you get involved in scientific publishing and or your current career? And what are some of the biggest challenges and the biggest rewards? And is there anything that surprised you about your current role? So maybe we could start with Rory and then we can kind of go down the line or however you guys want to do. We can also build off of each other because I think it seems like we have these two groups, right? Where some people, Rory and Andrea kind of have similar roles, and then Nancy and William seem to come from a similar background. So I will give the floor to Rory, I guess.
Yep, thank you, Julia. So, I mean, my motivation for getting involved with editing really was, I would say, increasing my exposure to kind of the way scientific writing is kind of, how do I say, like how scientific writing begins from a concept and then how you kind of write something clearly and try to sell an idea essentially or tell a story. And in that regard, the AFE program was something that was really a great opportunity for me to kind of develop that skill. I had already written a kind of news and views article previously, which was kind of, I'd say, motivated by my postdoc supervisor. So he wanted to write one and offered for me to be co-author, so we wrote that together. But I think what's been really great about the AFE role, where, as I mentioned previously, you kind of will the role of an AFE is to read a paper that's been accepted at the plant cell, and then your job is to kind of write an in brief or like a news and views style article that kind of summarizes the findings of the authors in a bit of more of an accessible, kind of less scientifically dense way, to increase, the community engagement with that manuscript and kind of help build enthusiasm for reading the primary article. And one of the things that was really interesting about that role is not just kind of increasing the exposure to the different types of plant science that there are, because I am very much an Arabidopsis researcher, I have to say, but also kind of seeing the nuts and bolts behind the scenes of how an academic kind of publishing kind of journal system works, right? So as an author, which I would have thought most people would have most experience with, as an author, you submit your paper and then you just kind of wait for the reviews to come back or for a decision from the editor. As an AFE, you kind of get a broader appreciation for all of the steps, all of the discussions that happen about a submitted manuscript, especially at community-led journals like Plant Cell, where the decision to accept or reject a paper is not made by one person, but there are kind of discussions which happen among kind of leading academics within those fields. And as a result, it kind of was gave me a really great appreciation for what happens behind the scenes. And obviously that is helpful for me kind of in improving my own writing, especially with respect to abstracts and letters that you would write to an editor when you submit a manuscript. So really, really helpful with that. And then I'd say the only kind of challenge I can talk about with respect to that role, and I think this is the most of any role we hold as academics beyond what we're doing in the lab, is the time, right? So time is our most precious resource, and fitting in, taking a day to read a whole paper and fully digest it as if you were reviewing it, and then actually writing one of these articles was quite time consuming. So you're always kind of finding the time was the challenge, but I think that's universally accepted in academia. So
Thanks so much, Rory. Andrew, do you have anything to build off of that?
Yes. So yeah, I would like to add like a major challenge or the motivation that I have to join editorial roles is because through my career I have seen that a lot of people and person and myself that we are not trained to be writers, right? So we have not that training in the labs sometimes. So personally, I didn't have that training, and for me, it was really hard to write my first paper because nobody teach me how to do it. And sometimes we are trained to be at the bench, but nobody actually teach us to how to write a scientific paper. That was my first motivation. And also as a non-native English speakers is even harder because yeah, sometimes it's not really easy like just to write a sentence. You want to be clear, concise, and also sorry. Yeah, you want to be clear, concise, and basically also attract people to read your research. I think that's one of the main challenge that I faced. So something that the assistant feature editor has offered me is a lot of support, a lot of feedback that has helped me to improve my writing skills. So now I can say that for me it's easiest to write a paper, to sit and basically write down all the ideas and try to be more clear, because also as part of the AFE, so you are part of the to review some papers. So in that case, you can see that sometimes the papers are not well written or you don't understand it very clearly. And I think this role has helped me to basically be trained to evaluate those type of papers or be more critical about the scientific reading that sometimes we have. Because yes, I will say that sometimes I have read some papers that they are not really clear explaining things. So, and sometimes, yeah, basically just we try to understand it, but at the end, so yeah, it has a lot of gaps in the story that you don't realize when you are writing a paper. So yeah, I think that was my first motivation to join a editorial role.
Thank you. Nancy, what are your thoughts on the question?
So in terms of how and why I got involved, well, so I had my first kid like right after or actually right before, anyway, right around the same time I turned in my dissertation for my PhD. So, and I was just didn't feel like I could parent or do science as well as I wanted to if I tried to do both of them at the same time. So I decided to stay home with kids, and then I figured I'd do a postdoc later. I really liked doing bench research and, felt like I was good at it. So, but I also didn't feel like, I felt like it needed to be all consuming if I was going to do it the way I wanted to. And then a couple of years and another kid later, Sharon Kessler, who's now at Purdue and was another grad school friend, forwarded me an email from the Plant Cell that was advertising for freelance science editors and told me I should do it. So I applied and then did that for several years. And it turned out to be a great fit because it was flexible. It was something I could, at that point I was living in New Mexico. I still do live in New Mexico. And it turned out I really liked it's the breadth of getting to work on think about different kinds of work. It's narrow. It's all within plant cellular and molecular biology, but it's broad within that group. And then I realized that in retrospect, I'd always been doing that kind of thing. So when I was an undergraduate at Swarthmore College, I was majored in biology, but I was also a writing associate. So that's kind of a peer writing tutor. We got a lot of training then. on working with authors to help them make the changes they need to get their ideas out. So it turns out, and then, you know, anytime I was in a lab, I was always the one that worked on people's papers, even for other labs. So I'd never noticed that path, but it turns out it was kind of always there. And I'd always struggled to narrow my focus. So when I was an undergrad, I never knew whether I picked biology, but I was interested in chemistry also. Same with like grad school. Okay, I can do this. And then it kept getting more narrow, but it always felt like I could have been interested in lots of things. So in retrospect, I think the editing was kind of a perfect fit because I get to do a deep dive into someone's thinking about one topic and then move to the next. And I like that overview of that kind of stuff. In terms of challenges, so being freelance for a long time before we started our company has its own set of challenges in terms of you're being outside of academia. Even just when I was writing in briefs for the plant cell, I didn't have access to like the journals. Like I needed to ask people to send me proofs and, you know, send me PDFs of journals so I could of articles that I wanted to cite. And then, you know, I've been working, we have everybody scattered. So you have to be really deliberate about building relationships and keeping them going. And when later we started our business, but we're still never been in the same place for very, very often. So it's a funny mix of needing to tell people like, hey, I found this like random tool in Word that's really helpful. And you never know whether everybody already knows about it. So it's ridiculous that you mentioned it, or other people are going to be like, oh, great, I didn't know that. Because nobody ever like walks behind someone's desk and sees what they're doing. You have to kind of get used to sharing it. So those are some of those things. Oh, in terms of surprises and things that were rewarding, it's been shocking to me how much I enjoy the actual business part, like running a business, needing to make it work. And then one of the biggest rewards has been to create jobs that keep people in science. So, you know, I don't know if they still use this metaphor, but they used to talk about the leaky pipeline that had a lot of generally young women leaving science. And a lot of our editors are just really excellent scientists who just needed more flexibility in terms of where they were living or when they were working or any of those kinds of things. And it's been really great for us to be able to create roles that keep people in science. And just, it's an amazing group of people we get to work with.
Thank you so much. It's interesting that you say that you had to have people send you things, right? That's something that you don't often think about when you're not affiliated with university, that sometimes you don't even have access to the articles you're supposed to be reading. So thank you. And finally, William. Maybe we could hear from William as opposed for the, yeah, there we go.
Hi. So yeah, what brought me into my role as a publisher? I think the thing about a scientific career is that it's competitive, right? It's difficult. It's sort of time limited. You're on short contracts, and there's a pressure that you feel very. I'm sure you will feel it too. A pressure to get somewhere. Now, I was lucky enough to be able to stay in that system, but yeah, it came to a point where I was feeling like, at the bench, I wasn't really being able to access the sort of questions that I wanted to ask, right? And I found a frustration creeping in with my scientific career. I, at the same time, saw an advert for the AMBO journal that was needing editors, and I just applied like everybody else, and and the rest is history. As far as surprises goes, it's actually quite a lot like being a scientist, being an editor. So when I was towards the end of my career, I was sitting in my office reading manuscripts and looking at experiments that students had done, giving them feedback and waiting for them to come back with new versions. Now I sit in my office reading manuscripts and looking at experiments that scientists have done, waiting for them to come back with new versions. I think there's a point at which you're not at the bench anymore, right, as a scientist. And I think there, your job really does look increasingly like an editor's job. I think what were the other things that I could talk about?
What are some challenges, maybe?
Challenges, yeah. I think I think you have to be good at making decisions when you're an editor. You can always go back and change decisions. When an author comes back and says, "Are you sure you got things right?" It's always nice to have an opportunity to have another look at things. But I think if you're the sort of person that sort of makes decisions in steps, and you sort of make a bit of a decision, then come back and then revisit it and then come back, and the sort of way that decisions sometimes can be made, I think it would drive you mad. I think you have to be very good at saying it's going to be this or this, and I think that's one thing which is difficult. So I think with and what else? Rewards, it has to be just helping, accepting articles is a wonderful thing. And yeah, writing that congratulations letter is most certainly the biggest reward of the job.
Thank you very much for sharing all of your perspectives. It was really nice to hear all of you talk about your jobs and why you enjoy the work that you do. We're going to move forwards to some specific questions for each panelist. Maybe if my colleague Fernanda would like to help me do this.
Thank you, Julia. Yes, right now we are going to now start with specific questions for each of you. We would like to start with Nancy. So you already shared with us how made you and why you decide the professional path that you have. But right now, our next question is going to be how you made that happen. I mean, how was the things that you need to put together to start your company in the professional editing? Thank you.
Yeah, so like I said, I sort of described how I became a science editor at the plant cell. So after a couple of years of doing that, so at that point I was freelance, we came together every year at the editorial board meetings for the plant cell. So I met, we had a team of 3 or 4 science editors at that point. And at one of the meetings, I think it was in Hawaii, we were at lunch, and the 3 of us were talking about realizing that we all were really enjoying doing the editing, and decided that we'd like to make sure we could do more of it. And at that point, I mean, as always, that role is not a particularly common one in journals. And we decided that we didn't want it to just be kind of at the whim of the editor-in-chief, our ability to do science editing, whether they were pushing for that in the budget. So we decided that we would start a company together, the 3 of us. To begin with, we each made ourselves individual sole proprietorships, and then we marketed ourselves together at that point as Plant Editors Cooperative. And let's see, so it took us a year from that point. What we did to market ourselves was, we bought a $10 Google page and built a little Google site. And then we each sent 3 emails to people we knew. So I should also say, at that point, all 3 of us had very tiny children and were fitting this in at night after the kids went to bed and stuff. So we really weren't trying to go crazy. So we, in July, I think we sent out emails to, each of us sent 3 emails out. That year we edited, from between July and December, we edited 6 papers that people sent to us. The next year was 60, just grown by word of mouth, and then just grew from there. And for us at that stage, it was always about managing growth. Eventually, we had more than the 3 of us could do. So we formed a company called Peridot Scientific Communications, and then brought in other freelancers and then eventually other employees to help with this. So now we have a process for those pre-submission papers that involve 2 rounds of editing from different editors, and then some quality control that we do, and then another round of polishing. So kind of an involved process with a really strong team. And then in terms of the other things that have grown from that, it's always been people coming to us and asking if we would do something. So we had people asking if we would help with marketing conferences, asking if we would help with social media. And we've had people ask us for other things that sometimes we don't think are in our wheelhouse. So sometimes we said no, but generally we've just built the business on word of mouth and on sort of expansion, not by market research, but by the market coming to us and asking us to. So I'm not sure we're the best example of like how to go about doing business, but yeah, it's just always grown from there. And yeah, how we made it happen, I guess, is just by being responsive to people.
Thank you, Nancy, for sharing that. That's very interesting. Now I will go forward to William. So I will say that normally the early career scientists are like unaware how to navigate the submission process. But can you describe how the editors can help the authors through the submission and also to get to a reviewing process like successful? Like what tips do you give to those persons during that process, please?
How to get to the reviewing process, right. So maybe I could tell you a little bit about what happens when a manuscript hits my desk. So we are 6 editors at the EMBO Journal. I'm the only one that really looks at plant work, unless it's sort of more, yeah, anyway, let's just say it like that. So 6 editors, and we receive about 3,500 submissions every year. So that means we get 500 odd manuscripts to read each every year. So the first thing that happens is that we will sort of we will give each manuscript, we will sort of assess how much effort to really invest in reading that manuscript fully. And this will then we will look at factors like the cover letter and the abstract. So these are really important parts of your manuscript. If your abstract doesn't reflect faithfully what is in the paper, or if there's stuff in the manuscript that's not in the abstract, you're more likely to get a sort of a very quick have your work sent back to you very quickly. People say, well, what's the cover letter for? What's the difference between the cover letter and an abstract? Well, the cover letter is where you can sort of put what you don't dare put in your abstract, right, in your cover letter. So where you're going, that you don't quite have the bottle to put it in your abstract and really stake it out there. You put it in the cover letter, right? That's not going to be published. So that's what that's for. And then the question comes, well, what then makes a manuscript stand out and shine? We could talk about a whole new webinar about what makes a manuscript stand out and shine. However, what I would say is, if you can explain in the introduction, if you can explain what you're doing and why you're doing it and get me interested in it, then you're already doing very, very well, right? So, so the data are the data. They can't be changed, but everything that we're talking about today, all the writing about things, is just a way of describing the data that you've collected, right? So it's just that's all that we're really talking about. And so I think what you really need to do is think about the sort of explanation that you want to offer. Here, I would differentiate, and maybe I'm going to stop talking now, but we can talk about it, and you can ask me about it later if you like, between lovely explanations and likely explanations. So we can talk about those later if you want. But yeah, that's probably enough for me to be going on with.
Thank you, William. Okay, so the next question is going to be begin with Andrea. So how did you apply for the position that you are taking in your role? I mean, and also I think you were plan fellow. How did you get there? Yeah, can you share with us like how was all the process for you? I mean, because you successfully did it, right?
Yes. Yeah, I think the requirements to be a Plantae fellow, I think there are two things: motivation and like that you like plants. So, but basically, to be part of a Plantae fellow is really easy. I think it's a really friendly program where everybody can apply. So just you, yeah, who just love and like plants can apply. So don't be afraid to do it. So yeah, I was part of Plantae Fellow 4 years ago, and it was pretty easy to apply. Was basically write an abstract. I mean, pick an article, write an abstract. I mean, it not necessarily has to be an abstract. Also, it can be an infographic, a video. You can make an interview or, yeah, for example, a poster or something that you want to share with the plant community. And then you have to write a motivation letter and, yeah, basically wait to be accepted in the program. So, yeah, to be part of the assistant feature editor, I think I would say this a little bit more competitive. So yeah, in that time, I mean, the last year for me was basically also write a motivation letter, write an abstract, but this is more like a with yeah, I remember it was required write more words in the abstract. So, and also you have to have already a publication as a first author. So yeah, basically to demonstrate that you can write a paper or understand how to write a paper. Yeah, but I think that basically we have to be really, yeah, basically have the courage to apply it and don't be afraid to be rejected. So if we don't try, so we won't know if we will be accepted at some point for those programs.
Thank you, Andrea. And then for Rory, it's going to be similar question, but in this case also a little focus in your experience. I mean, can you explain a little more the background of what an assistant feature editors do? And then,
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, the process is essentially that when a paper has been accepted, so it's been through the review process, the editor, the handling editors of that paper are satisfied that it meets the requirements of the journal and that the authors have met the expectations of the reviewers, and there's kind of, a balance there. The article itself will then get sent to me or Mary Williams. And then we kind of advertise it to the AFEs. But the role essentially is that you as an AFE will read a paper, and you do have to read it as closely as if you were reviewing it, because you need to fully understand not just how the authors kind of did their investigations, but also you're kind of trying to retell the author's story from like a third party perspective, right? That's essentially what you're doing. And so the aim is to kind of capture some of that, and at the same time make the article seem more interesting for people to then want to read and engage with. I think one of the challenges that or one of the things that I remember having to think a lot more about is, as an AFE, I think it's a great opportunity to also offer your own voice towards a particular like paper or scientific article, where you can also add some discussion towards a paper at the end in your kind of concluding remarks, where you might outline why a paper might be important, why the results or the outcomes of an investigation might be important, but also in some cases some limitations I've seen people add, which that's science. Highlighting some of the like remaining questions. And it's really an opportunity for an author, as an AFE author, to improve their writing, but also learning how to read a paper. So I think this is not something that we're taught often. And as an AFE, you have to read a paper very quickly, and I think being able to process what the message is and how the authors did it is really important. And I'm sure, William, you would agree actually that that's kind of one of the first challenges, I suppose, with an editorial role, is learning to skim read a paper without missing any of the key bits of information, and being able to process it as quickly as possible whilst not missing out any of its essence. And then, I mean, the process itself, you would then, prepare your draft article that, 500-600 words, and then send it on to the authors. They have a look, they'll give you their comments, and the handling editors will have a look. And then, so it goes through several rounds of revision before the papers themselves, the in-briefs, appear online.
Thank you, Rory. That was really useful. Now we are gonna do the next part of the program. So we go with Joanna or Julia.
Yeah, so I think now might be a good time to open up the Q&A. I've seen some questions that have been coming up in the chat, so maybe we can ask our audience members first if they have any interesting questions. Or maybe Daniela, have you looked through the chat and seen like what seems to be like the main theme of the questions that people have been asking? Maybe we can ask one of those.
Yes, we have some questions, and I think we can start with this one. So, how AI is impacting each of your roles, and how you see AI impacting scholarly publishing currently and in the future?
I'm happy to address that if you want. It definitely, AI is absolutely shaking up the editing space in terms of, especially in the sort of, there was a whole crowd of editing companies that were real basic, like just trying to fix grammar and not necessarily diving into the content a whole lot. And I think that those companies have been really disrupted by AI. In terms of what we do, which is more science editing, where we really interact with the content, it's actually been interesting. We've almost seen our clients doubling down and using us more. So, and it definitely changes how we edit, because especially if people use AI to sort of clean up the grammar and get some thoughts down, our editors have to adjust to not using sort of typos and grammar mistakes as a trigger for what text to really focus on, because it all, like, at first pass reads clean. But then when you dig in, a lot of times, especially if it's AI, it can be pretty circular or actually not make any sense. So especially in the introductions and some of these places, and then you have to pay attention to the methods and things that you didn't used to have to pay so much attention to, because there might just randomly be the wrong protein mentioned or the wrong kinds of things cited, or suddenly there's, especially for plant biology, that I think that the language learning models tend to be animal centric. So lots of times you'll suddenly see something that doesn't exist in plants because the language learning models thought it was referring to something else. So our editors have had to get used to, have had to kind of retrain their brains about different things, like things that you used to be able to just read through and just make sure they were grammatically correct. Now you have to really pay attention and make sure that they actually are like every word is right and not just a random hallucination. And then really check the logic, even though it might sound good if you're not thinking about it, you have to focus way more. But at the same time, it's that much more necessary because there's just a lot of nonsense coming out of it. So I think it's a super helpful tool, and it really, especially if you have some thoughts and you need to get them together, or you just need to like brainstorm and get around it. And then, but you just have to look so carefully at what comes out. And I think not everybody is doing that super well. We have some journals, it's been really interesting. We've had some journals who've really gone away from using AI. I think there was a big uptake right when it first came out, and then we've had some sort of come back and, because it wasn't good. We have other journals that are just like telling their authors, run it through AI first, don't submit it without that. So there's a really different, I don't think the industry has really come to a conclusion on it. And of course the tools will change. So our view of it is we want to make sure that we have people doing the things that only people can do. And if there's other tools that are going to be good for the things, those tools should be used. There's no reason that not to use a tool that's useful. So, but I think people are still figuring out where that is in my area anyway.
Thank you, Nancy. That was a very complete opinion about it. I enjoyed what you said. We also have a question that was submitted in advance, perhaps for William, which is beyond the traditional citation metrics. What strategies do you recommend for early career researchers to increase the real world visibility of their work, or maybe their first major publication?
Yeah, I think some journals are good at this and some journals are not so good at this, right? So how do you increase the visibility of your work? I am a little bit stuck here. I mean, I think beyond the obvious sort of things that you're probably all doing, and you absolutely don't need a 50-something-year-old man telling you that you need to be using social media. That's one thing. Of course, your universities will probably have a communications department. You can use them. I think also, I think we all go into science wanting to participate and take part in scientific conversations, right? So I think a good thing to do is to identify and interact with and seek out at conferences those people who are going to be interested in your work and whose work your work will be affecting, and just and be confident about taking ownership of that conversation. I think that there is a bit of reticence here, and it's not an easy thing to do. So yeah, but outside, to the wider world and outside the scientific community, there are blogs, there are public science events. Some people are surprised by how quickly this sort of thing can snowball. If someone sees that you're a person that knows about, I don't know, for example, genetically modified organisms, you can find yourself very quickly being asked by news outlets to comment on this sort of thing if you've done it once or twice. So keep at it, and if that's the thing you want to do. And I think if it's your interest, then do it as a hobby as well. I mean, it's something which is fun and can be really rewarding. So look at it as a different part of your life. Just getting involved in talking about science, it's a good thing, I would say.
Thank you so much, William. Does anybody have any other final, maybe a quick question that we could ask before we wrap up for the day? Daniela, do you see any other interesting questions in the chat?
Yes, we have two questions that I think are related. So it says, as an editor looking for fresh reviewers, what specific markers do you look for to trust a postdoc or early career researchers with a review? And why most journals hesitate to invite postdocs or early career researchers to review?
Maybe I can answer that one too.
Yes.
Look, I think there is an enormous pressure on academics when it comes to review. There's a lot of science out there at the moment, and lots of professional scientists spend lots and lots of their time writing reviews and referee reports. So how do I do this? This is actually a really good way that AI can be used in science. So we use AI to help us identify reviewers that are maybe not known to us. If you go to conferences, there might be editors at a conference, and what they will be doing as well is looking around and talking to people and trying to work out who's interested in what, so they can possibly be expanding their reviewer pool as well. It's absolutely important that early career researchers are involved in reviewing. We think we have an early career reviewer program that we are currently trialing. Drop me an email if you would like to go on a list of early career researchers at the EMBO Journal and a quick word about your expertise, and I'd be very happy to put you on that list. But yeah, I think it's an important thing to do, and I think it's it's something that should happen more, I would say.
Thank you, William. That was really cool. So can you, Andrea and Rory, we have another here comment that maybe can you share like a final thought in the case in your position that right now you are, and what is the most rewarding or unexpected benefits that you got from Plante program for the assistant feature editor fellow? Like,
I mean, I think for me, the most rewarding thing was just to, especially now I'm kind of helping run the program, is seeing all the other AFEs writing improving. So Andrea mentioned this when she was speaking earlier. Obviously, I have the privilege of writing science in my first language, which not a lot of people have. And so for me, being able to see this like cohort of international plant scientists working for the plant cell as AFEs now, and how much their writing is improved through the program and the input that we have on the editorial board to help improve the writing of the AFE. So that's been really rewarding.
thank you.
For me, I think my most rewarding thing about to be part of the assistant feature editor is to be able to write my articles easiest. And also, I think it's been rewarding to see the behind the scenes, what is happening in all the publishing process. Because, yeah, to see that it's not the decision of one person, to see that is the decision of several people that are really professionals in the article that they are reviewing. So I think that's a really cool thing to see when you are part of this program. But also, I think to share your thoughts with the people that help you to write the comments that, for example, in my case, I write the in briefs for the plant cell journal. I think the more rewarding is to see that sometimes you don't have mistakes in your writing. So, and that means that this program helps you to improve your writing and your to be more concise and precise when you write a scientific article.
Great, thank you so much. I want to first really thank our 4 panelists for participating today and sharing out their perspectives. I really appreciate you taking the time. So if everybody can give them a little round of applause with your react button if you'd like, I really appreciate that. And I do want to thank Julia, Daniela, and Fernanda, who were the people that proposed this as a topic that they knew early career people would want to hear about. And I also want to thank Dr. Sharon Kessler, Dr. Adam Mott, and Dr. Mohammed Salahin, who are part of the Early Career Scholars Subcommittee and have been giving input and advice over the last, I guess it's been 3 or 4 months as we've worked to develop this. The recording of this webinar will be posted to our webpage within about a week, after I do some editing, and I will email the link to everybody who registered. I invite you to share it to any of your trainees, your friends, your colleagues who might want to learn more about these programs. We learned about Plante Fellows, we learned about the AFE program. These are things that you as trainees can actively start preparing to apply for, and this can help your career. You may also be interested in our next webinar, which is coming up in 2 weeks, June 24th. And this is focused on LGBTQ plus voices in science and community. And it's also being held or organized by some of our early career scholars in conjunction with Pride Month. So we hope that you will join the panel that we've got coming up. So with that, please join me in thanking all of our panelists. And thank you all for coming to the event today.